It may not feel like it to some, but tonight's matchup against the Ole Miss Rebels is a must-win game for the Kentucky Wildcats.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for various SEC-related things, but on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky basketball's matchup with the Ole Miss Rebels. Feels like a must-win game for the Kentucky Wildcats. Going to talk about what the Rebels do well, what they struggle with, and then we're going to give our final score prediction later on in the show. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the show. And if you're listening on podcast, I would appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky versus Ole Miss tonight. This one happening late in the evening at 9 o'clock on ESPN. Going to be a long night for us here at Big Blue Nation. But nevertheless, we push on. Ole Miss has had a bit of an interesting season so far. Started off the year 13-0 before crashing in conference play. Now 5-5, 18-5 overall. The Rebels are essentially a hodgepodge of a bunch of different transfer portal pieces in Chris Beard's first season in Oxford. I think the interesting thing about Ole Miss so far this year is despite having all of these different transfer portal guys at some of these really important positions, they've still been able to have some success. They've not completely fallen off the face of the earth, and in fact, they should finish with at least 20 wins this season, despite all of that. So Chris Beard looking like he's already doing a much better job than Kermit Davis did during his few years with the program. But the thing that Ole Miss does really well that I think that we need to pay attention to here is their offense is actually pretty good, which is why today we may talk a little bit about Ole Miss's guards matching up against the Kentucky Wildcats. As of right now, Ole Miss is top 30 on KenPom in adjusted offensive efficiency. They are 10th in the nation in three-point shooting percentage, and they are really good at not turning the ball over, and they are decent at grabbing offensive rebounds. They play with a little bit of a slower pace overall, but their offense does like to go at times. And the leader of this offense so far this season, at least in terms of possessions used, is Allen Flanigan. Allen Flanigan's second on the team and scoring at 15.7 points per game. Flanigan transferred in from Auburn after, I believe, spending 4 seasons there with the Tigers. But the leading scorer for Ole Miss is actually guard Matthew Morrell, who, if I'm not mistaken, has actually been with the Ole Miss Rebels for quite some time now, almost 17 points per game, shooting 47.6% from the floor and 39.4% from three. So while Flanigan utilized on 27% of possessions and Morrell only used on 22, Morrell significantly more efficient, also has a much better true shooting percentage than Flanigan does. But those two guys are kind of what make this team run. And then if you look lower on the scoring totals here for the Rebels, Jalen Murray at 14.3 points per game, another guard who is shooting 42.5% from beyond the arc. Those are the 3 big-time scorers for the Ole Miss Rebels, and it brings into question, like I said a second ago, how is Kentucky basketball going to match up with these guards? As of right now, I think Kentucky, obviously, one of the worst defenses in the entire SEC, and what's even worse is Matthew Morrell and Flanigan listed at 6'6" and 6'4". These are not slouches. These are very physical guards. Jalen Murray listed at only 5'11", 170 pounds, but these guys can still get after it on the offensive end of the floor. Kentucky at times has really struggled to hold not just one guard, but multiple guards for the opposition to even average games. And we've seen this against teams like Florida. We've seen things like this against Texas A&M, where the volume of those shooters just simply kept the Aggies in that contest. Kentucky has struggled. They have struggled at times against teams first and second and sometimes third guy. How Alan Flanigan operates in this game, a bit of an awkward lefty. I'm not a huge fan of his three-point shot. I'm not a huge fan of the way that he runs the offense at different times for the Rebels. Was not a big fan of it during his time at Auburn. I don't know how Kentucky is going to handle him, at least who they're going to assign, rather to be on him for most of this game. Will Adu Thiero get the nod? Will Justin Edwards get the assignment? I'm not sure, but it's something to monitor here. If Kentucky can hold Matthew Morrell and Alan Flanigan to inefficient shooting numbers, I think Kentucky's going to have a legitimate shot in this one. I think Kentucky's got a legitimate shot to win this game. Some other things that we may want to note here about the Ole Miss Rebels, despite starting the year 13-0, they didn't really have a strong non-conference slate. They didn't really beat anybody of note. Their best win was against UCF, who was ranked 64th in the KenPom ratings. Now, they have had a couple of solid wins during conference play against Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and Florida, but they have lost 2 games in a row back-to-back against Auburn and South Carolina, 2 of the better teams in this conference. So what you make of Ole Miss, I think, at the end of the season may not be reflective of what they are in future years underneath Chris Beard, but as of right now, this is a team that has some really good guards and can definitely put it on the floor and shoot threes. Although they are not particularly dominant from outside the arc in terms of volume, they're not really reliant on the three-point shot. They still can toss it up, absolutely. So that's what I think the Ole Miss Rebels do well. I think also you have to look on defense, and their block percentage is top 5 nationally. They've got some height on this team as well, with Musa Cisse, the transfer from Oklahoma State, at 7 feet tall. Jamarian Sharp, number 3, who is 7'5", transferred in from Western Kentucky, also leads the nation in block percentage. They've got some height. They've got some physicality. But what do the Ole Miss Rebels do poorly? What do they struggle with? Well, I want to dive into all of that in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find professionals that are right for the role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is super easy when you have all of those quality candidates. It's so easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, continuing along here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. A little under the weather today, but nevertheless, we push on. Thank you so much for checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed already, please go ahead and do so, whether that is on YouTube or on the podcast. So we've talked about what the Ole Miss Rebels do well. We've talked about the fact that their offense is pretty good. They've got some really physical guards. They've got some physical bigs. They're top 5 in the country in shot blocking percentage. They can really shoot the three. They can move with tempo. They've got some pieces that may give Kentucky some problems. And I think that the matchup here is really important today. I think the way those guards step up and make plays against Kentucky's is going to be very important. Can Kentucky finally step up and play some defense? Now, they're going to have a chance to do some good things in this game because Ole Miss is not perfect. Like we said, they didn't really beat anybody in non-conference play. They've gotten some good wins in SEC play, but they're not great. They lost to Auburn twice, lost to LSU on the road, giving up 89, gave up 90 to Tennessee, lost to South Carolina. And this team on defense is a little bit worse than Kentucky is actually in terms of adjusted efficiency. They're 130th in the country. Despite that really good block percentage, they do struggle to hold opponents inside the arc. Opponents are shooting almost 49% from inside the arc, which is 109th nationally. They also allow 32.6% from beyond the arc. That is 113th nationally. They don't create a lot of non-steal turnovers. And the big one here, which may be where Kentucky can step up and actually try and have some physicality in this game, is offensive rebounding. Ole Miss gives up a ton of second chance opportunities. They give up an offensive rebound on 35.4% of possessions. That is 353rd nationally. That is 10th worst in the country. I think that Kentucky at times this season has really struggled to not just play good defense, but also rebound well on both sides of the ball. They have really struggled, and it has hurt them time and time again in conference play. You look at the game against Texas A&M. You look at the game against Florida just a couple of weeks ago. The game against Tennessee, the game against Gonzaga. When Kentucky has lost, they have struggled to assert themselves and grab boards on either side of the basket. Ole Miss has a lot of height. Kentucky has a lot of height, but lacks physicality. Can they maybe, in this game, can they maybe step up and make some plays and grab some of these rebounds? Go up against Musa Cisse. Go up against Jamarian Sharp. If you're Ugonna Onyenso, if you're Aaron Bradshaw, if you're Zvonimir Ivasic, grab those rebounds. Be more physical. Put yourself in better positions to grab the misses. If you can do that, and you can give yourself as many possessions as possible, Kentucky's going to have an easier time than they would not grabbing rebounds in this game. I mean, that's not a revelation. But Ole Miss can crash the glass themselves. But, man, they really struggle giving up second chance points. If Kentucky can limit second chance opportunities and they can also get some themselves, they should win this game. Emphasis on should. Right now, Kentucky, I feel like, has to win this game. We mentioned that earlier. At 6-4 in conference play, having lost to Gonzaga this past weekend, now 16-7. You need to be able to pick up some momentum, and you need to win the games you're supposed to win. Kentucky has a 75% chance to win this game, according to KenPom. They should win this game 86-79. After that, they're projected to go 3-4 over their final 7 games. They're supposed to lose at Auburn. They're supposed to win at LSU, but barely. They're supposed to lose at home to Alabama. They're supposed to lose on the road to Mississippi State. They're supposed to beat Arkansas and Vanderbilt. And then they are supposed to lose to Tennessee on the road. If that plays out the way that it is projected to right now, and it's not worse, knock on wood, it's not worse, then Kentucky has to win this game. They have to get a resume booster here, or at least another game where they beat a decent team in their conference, and it's a quad 2 win, and you're able to look up and say at the end of the day, hey, we beat a good team. Because the last few times you played at home against good teams, you've lost in embarrassing fashion. Kentucky has not beaten a team inside the top 40 on KenPom since Mississippi State on January 17th. It's been rough. Kentucky's got to win this game. So what are our predictions for this contest? What do we think is going to happen? I want to dive into that in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Shoot your shot with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, wrapping up the Tuesday edition, I forgot what day it is, of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you again. If you have not subscribed to the show already, would appreciate it if you went ahead and did so. If you're listening on podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Okay, so Kentucky basketball. I think this is a must-win game. I think there are some good things that could happen in this matchup. I think that there are potentially some bad things that can happen in this matchup, as we've previously mentioned. Let's wrap it all up here and give a final score prediction. So again, Ole Miss has guards, 3 guards, in fact, that can put it on the deck and score. They can play with pace. They shoot well from beyond the arc. And they have a good offense overall. They can crash the glass a little bit as well because of their height. Kentucky has really struggled to play defense at the guard position, and will continue to do so until they prove that they can play one game of competent defense, which they have yet to do this season. I think the one thing that could hold Ole Miss in check is their struggles at the rim so far this season. Despite all of these really good guards, despite all of this height, they are 210th nationally in two-point field goal percentage at 49.5% on offense. That's really bad. I don't know how this is possible. After seeing them play a few times, it kind of makes sense, but they should be significantly more efficient if they ran their stuff a little bit differently, at least I think. So they may hold themselves in check there, but overall, I think that their guards are going to get theirs. Can Kentucky either keep up? Can they themselves play good enough offense to where they can just kind of run with the Rebels here? Because you know Kentucky's defense is going to give up 85 in this game, at least. At least. If Kentucky holds this team underneath 75, I will be shocked. I think Kentucky's got the offensive weapons to win this one. I think they've got the height to close out on some rebounds on the defensive end. I think they've got the ability to hold guys like Allen Flanigan in check, who are not the most efficient shooters. But guys like Matthew Morrell, guys like Musa Cisse, the forward there, the 7-footer, I just don't know if Kentucky's got it in them to really like close out on defense. It's so difficult to pick against this Kentucky team because of their ceiling, but they've not shown that ceiling in weeks. They've not shown the ability to close a game out like this in weeks. Because they have a 75% chance to win, because it's Kentucky at home, I'm going to say they win. I'm going to say they win by 2. I'm going to say Kentucky wins this game 90 to 88. Because there's no way Ole Miss is being held underneath 80. It's not happening in this game. Kentucky's got to get out and run on offense, and they've got to prove that. If they can rebound a little bit, they can show a little bit of physicality, I think people will be happy. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_ and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and God bless.